Rachel Notley's NDP government in Alberta has launched a new online survey asking Albertans the best way to fix global warming. Seriously, I mean, many new Alberta NDP MLAs haven't even figured out how to open a constituency office yet, but they think they can change the world's weather. It's their big agenda item for the rest of the year. Alberta doesn't have a provincial budget yet, even though the province now has a record deficit. Alberta is in recession. Unemployment in Fort McMurray is now 8% compared to, say, 6.2% in St. John's, Newfoundland. 75% of drilling rigs in Alberta are idle. Rachel Notley has turned the most economically competitive province in Canada into the most punitive economy, doubling carbon taxes, hiking corporate taxes by 20%, hiking personal income taxes too. I don't think she can change the actual climate, but she certainly changed the business climate. It's so bad in Alberta, last month Irving Shipbuilding came to Fort McMurray to host a job fair there to recruit workers to go work in Nova Scotia. Think about that. Anyways, the NDP has a new survey about global warming. It's their big push. I went online and I took this government survey to see what it's like. That's the first joke. I mean, I was born in Alberta. I love Alberta, but I don't live there anymore. I'm in Toronto now. But I just clicked onto the survey and I just took it from here in Toronto. I suppose you could take the survey from anywhere in the world, Montreal, San Francisco, Saudi Arabia, whatever. And then just for fun, I took the survey a second time from Toronto. I might take it a third time if I'm bored. So it's clearly a junk survey. It's a useless instrument. It's unreliable. It's unscientific. I didn't hack it. I just did what I was invited to do. It's not a survey, actually. It's a propaganda document, propagandizing the NDP's radical ideas outwards to the world. And depending on how they like the junk results they get, they'll use it as propaganda inwards, telling Albertans, well, this is what the world wants us to do. Our online survey says so. They actually say they're going to use it for, quote, for statistical purposes related to this initiative. They actually call this statistics. But let's go through it. Let me show you this propaganda in action. It's really quite something. The first question is, how concerned are you personally about climate change? And then, do you believe the government should take stronger action? Okay, so you click on these two questions and it takes you to, not the next question, but look, a huge political page. Take a look. It says, before we ask further questions, we'd like to share some information to put into context the government's commitment to take action. What? You mean right in the middle of a survey that's designed for statistical purposes, you're going to put your thumb on the scale to provide information? Political spin? So that's not a survey. That's not a poll. That's not anything scientific. That's what political tricksters call a push poll. It's like saying, do you support Mr. Jones for Parliament? Oh, you do, eh? Well, just so you know, Mr. Jones is an awful man. Here's how awful he is. Okay, now back to our survey. Do you still support Mr. Jones? That is not a survey. That is a trick. It's simulating a consultation. It's not a consultation. In this case, it's a scolding lecture from Rachel Notley to anyone who believes oil and gas is good for Alberta. Let me read to you the first two sentences from this push page. I won't read you the whole thing. It's such an embarrassing mishmash of cliches. I feel like I was reading some David Suzuki propaganda for grade school children. Here's the first two sentences. Let me just read this part. The world's climate has changed at an unprecedented rate since the 1950s. Increasing concentrations of greenhouse gases have warmed the atmosphere, diminishing snow and ice, warming oceans, raising sea levels, and causing more extreme weather such as floods and droughts. We can also see its effects locally through impacts such as the spread of the mountain pine beetle. Now that's just scientifically untrue. There's no correlation between carbon dioxide and weather, let alone causation. So it's not surprising that none of this crap is footnoted or cited, because it's not facts, it's faith. It's as close to NDP religious dogma as they get. Now, you don't have to agree with me on my skepticism that I just told you. You don't have to agree with me that their science is incorrect to acknowledge that, correct or not, that's not how you do a survey. That's how you do government re-education of people while lying to them that it's a survey. It's called a survey, but it is not a survey. I won't go through all the propaganda on this page except one more line. They say that if Alberta doesn't do what the NDP wants it to do, quote, Alberta will find itself increasingly isolated and shut out of markets. Really? Is there a country in the entire world that does or doesn't buy its oil based on the carbon tax policy of the country the oil comes from? Does the United States only allow in oil that meets some left-wing carbon tax test? Of course not. They buy oil from anyone and everyone, even from their enemies in OPEC. China, India, all the world's oil consumers, they buy oil from anyone, even from Russia and Iran. Does the NDP really think that the reason Alberta can't export its oil is because people don't want oil? No, it's because the NDP and others block pipelines for their own political reasons. Okay, now that you've received their stern lecture in the middle of their survey, click on to the next page of the survey. Here's their next scold. The health, environmental, and economic impacts of climate change mean that Alberta must act now. Oh, so there's no doubt that oil and gas are a problem, and no doubt that Alberta must act now? Canada emits less than 2% of the world's man-made carbon dioxide, and the oil sands emit just 8% of Canada's carbon dioxide emissions. So the oil sands are literally 0.15% of the world's carbon dioxide. China's coal-fired power plants emit more in 2 days than we do in a whole year, but Alberta must act now. This is called a survey, by the way. Alberta must act now. That's their survey. And the questions that follow this are like a reading comprehension test of the propaganda on the previous page. They just told you the facts. Now they're quizzing you to see if you remember their facts. I'm not going to go through it all. The questions, there's too many of them. Let's skip ahead to the next page. Let's read the coaching at the top, though. As Alberta takes action on climate change, there are numerous policy directions and tools it can employ. Oh, so it's decided there will be climate change action. So it's not really a survey. It's a rubber stamp on a predetermined decision. Climate action. Don't they really mean tax action? Because no one really thinks that Rachel Notley can change the temperature of the world, do they? What follows is the NDP fantasy for Alberta, dreaming up different ways to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs by taxing oil. Should Alberta join Ontario and Quebec's cap and trade system so we can pay those provinces for the right to produce oil sands oil? I paraphrase. Should Alberta taxpayers pay huge corporate subsidies to connected lobbyists selling wind and solar powered schemes? Again, I paraphrase. There's a call for a carbon tax, number 12. Number 13 is a carbon tax for industry. Of course, Alberta already has one of those. The NDP just doubled that tax, but hey, why not double again, am I right? But here's my absolutely favorite part. So far, I answered honestly to all the questions I was asked. No, 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 which is, I suspect, what a great many Albertans would say, though they would be swamped by all the NDP activists taking the survey from Toronto or Saudi Arabia or whatever. But look at question 14. Let me read it verbatim. Now, thinking about the options discussed above, please rank them by priority, with the highest being the action you would most like to see taken. Drag the choices into your preferred order or use the arrow buttons to move the options up or down. Yeah, but I don't want any of those actions taken. They're all awful ideas, all of which will kill jobs. It's like listening to a Linda McQuaig speech. There are no good ideas in there. They're all bad. But look at that website. It forces you to pick your favorite. This is a survey, it's called. You can't say no, though. You must say yes. You must choose a favorite bad idea. This is not a survey. It's not scientific. It's not fair. It's not statistically valid. It's not free from tampering. It invites tampering. It's full of contentious propaganda that shows the fix is in. And if the fix is in on this survey, and then the fix is in on the advisory panel under whose name this survey went out. That's this group here. See, that's the official climate change panel that Rachel Notley appointed. That's in addition to the royalty review panel. Both are trying to wring more golden eggs out of the dying Alberta oil sands goose. There's no jobs panel in Alberta, by the way. The only jobs the NDP cares about are government jobs run by their union friends, like Rachel Notley's husband, a union boss with CUPE. CUPE will do just fine under these plans. On an upcoming show, I'll document how extremely biased many of the members on this panel are. We have a union boss from Unifor, a labor union that has come out against the oil sands, so her mind is obviously made up. I see at least one former lobbyist who used to be financed by the San Francisco-based Tides Foundation. So basically it's a bunch of anti-oil activists. But the advisory panel who put out this survey is led by a competent, fair-minded man. His name is Dr. Andrew Leach. He's a professor of economics and energy at the University of Alberta. I've interviewed him before on my show at Sun News. Now, I don't always agree with him, but he's a real academic with real rigor. And I simply don't believe that this fake survey and the Andrew Leach that I know are reconcilable. Dr. Leach believes in the scientific method, in genuine inquiries, not in fake propaganda. I don't blame a professor for accepting an appointment from the NDP government. I wish the NDP government would hire more economists from Alberta, not just outsource their thinking to NDPers in Toronto. But before Dr. Leach's advisory panel even starts, it proves it's a fake. It's not about real consultation. It's not about genuine surveys. It's about disreputable push polls and David Suzuki-level propaganda mush. I can't say I know Dr. Leach well, but I know him well enough to believe that he has enough character to pull the plug on this sham or to pull himself out of it. Either he is running his advisory panel or someone else is. And right now it's clear to me that the NDP mercenaries flying into Alberta each Monday morning from Toronto and Vancouver, they're behind this crap. The survey is a disgrace. The old Professor Leach that I would know, I think he would say so. I hope he would still say so, unless the excitement of having access to the corridors of power is too intoxicating to him. That's the thing about getting into bed with politicians. There's a risk of becoming one yourself. Will you help me? Here's my idea. Let's all send Dr. Andrew Leach a letter. A firm letter, but a polite letter. He's not a bad man. In fact, he may be just about the only person on this panel who can and would stop the NDP's attack on the oil sands. But if he doesn't stand up to this garbage survey, he won't stand up to anything. They'll push him over every time. So let's write him an email and ask him, does he believe in consultation and economics or in NDP propaganda? Is he going to be given his marching orders by Rachel Notley and Brent Dancy, or is he free to use his own judgment? Are the NDP just renting out his good reputation to pull a fast one on Albertans? Join me in writing to Dr. Andrew Leach. Click right here to go to our page with his email address on it, or visit fakesurvey.ca. We'll have Professor Leach's contact info there. Tell him this is the time to stand up for Alberta and for his own integrity. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.